Imagine how you would feel if you, sorry, imagine how you would feel if you lived in Falmouth and this great big barge full of immigrants is going to be parked there. I mean, how much longer are people supposed to put up with this? I mean, people should be able to see that the country is being flooded with all kinds of immigrants. They may or may not be refugees. It actually doesn't matter to us. It's not our problem. There's a war in Sri Lanka. Sorry, well, there is. There's a war in Sudan. There's instability in Pakistan. And a combination of political problems, civil war, earthquakes, bad weather, you name it, all around the world, Sudan as well, Somalia, you name it. And yet, every time there's a problem, the government encourages people to move. And we can't carry on like this. I mean, even 30 or 40 years ago, Enoch Powell was aware what was going to happen. And it has happened. And now we have a very, very unsafe society with rising crime, a police service who just can't cope. The prisons are overflowing with immigrants. Um, I should point out that, like most people who live in London, I know many immigrants, foreigners here for work or for whatever reason, and most of them are okay. I'm not saying they're not. But if you invite hundreds of thousands and millions of people in, there are also going to be thousands of very bad people who come in with them. For example, I mean, do we need beggars? You know, if you go shopping in London, there's so many beggars. You know, if you stop your car or something like that, beggars appear and smear your windscreen. I mean, there's nothing, I mean, what is going on? You know, we can't carry on like this. And in the past, the people who lived in the countryside um, didn't understand the implications of these policies because they were insulated from this. Mostly it was people in Blackburn and Bradford and London and Birmingham and places like that that had these people moving in, changing the demographics completely. I mean, what percentage of Londoners are English people who were born in London? And the answer is a small minority. The vast majority of people who live in London are immigrants, many of them recent immigrants, and they don't even treat local people with respect. Many of them are very arrogant, very entitled, and every day more and more arrive. Now, we're supposed to have a Conservative government, and the Conservative government pretended that they were going to be tough on immigration. I mean, these ludicrous plans of sending people at our expense to Rwanda is a joke. This is costing billions to deal with immigration. And of course, I'm not saying that some immigrants don't, lots of immigrants are working, that's true. But I mean, how many more Uber drivers do we need? How many more Deliveroo drivers do we need? And many of the people who work in the NHS are actually working there in order to deal with the immigrants who come in to get free medical attention, right? Now, as I said, I have always and will always treat people as individuals. There are some nationalities I prefer to others, and in my experience, different nationalities quite often have personal, I mean, you know, sometimes we say it's a cliche, but quite often I found that there is elements of truth in all these cliches. I mean, if you know Scottish people, you might realise that by overall they are pretty tight, and Jewish people have their characteristics as well, and so does everyone else. But that doesn't mean I won't treat people as individuals, because I know that within every nationality there are good and bad people, and for every nationality the vast majority of people are neither good nor bad, but simply try and get on with their lives and do whatever it takes to survive. Most people have no ethics, and I've discovered that even people who I thought were my friends, if you need them, they won't be there in most cases. What you should try and do is lend your friend your jacket and put 20 quid in the pocket and see if he gives you the money back, or her. But it's not just that. Maybe they will, but you know, if you ever have a problem and you need a witness or you need someone to back you up or something like that, lots and lots of people, I think the most people, including people you probably imagine wrongly are your friends, will not be there for you when you need them. And therefore, I have to say, unfortunately, that we're all pretty much on our own in this life. And if you want something done, you're going to have to do it yourself. Don't expect any help from other people. I mean, you have to fight your own battles. People won't help you. And people will not stand up for right, which is why the COVID thing was such a success. Because it showed, and people, I remember people used to say things like, how did the Germans let it happen? How did they let Hitler do this and that? Well, leaving aside the fact that many of the things we're taught about World War II are completely false and just scripted and made up nonsense, assuming it was true, we know that the vast majority of people will always go along with the power structures. And what happened in Germany in the 1930s, it was happening in Britain in the last 2 or 3 years. In other words, the public stopped making independent decisions, stopped being objective, and simply looked around them. They saw everyone else was being obedient and they decided to be obedient too, simply because they lack backbone. The vast majority of people lack backbone. Now, I know a lot of people think it's virtuous to support refugees. I know nice people who support them, but they're making a massive mistake, because the demographics of Britain, the only demographics who are having children are the demographics, the Asian and African people, in particular Muslims, and many towns in Britain will become Muslim dominated in years to come. Some already have. Some parts of Blackburn and Bradford and places like that, and Birmingham, some parts of they're already Muslim, and there are parts of London which have got African or West Indian majorities, and so on. But it's not just the existing people who are here. I mean, maybe, I mean, I think we've already got far too many. I mean, it would be better if some of these people went home, a lot of them. But instead of people going home, it's more people are arriving every day. And it's always the same demographic. It's young men. And we're told that these young, aggressive men are fleeing war. And yet they're such heroes that they've left all their women behind. So what are we going to do with hundreds of thousands of young, aggressive men? Well, they're going to have to look for partners, aren't they? Because at that age, you're going to want some action. And so basically, we're inviting men in to mate with our own local women. Not that many of them are very attractive, to be fair. I have to say British women are not the most attractive for my personal taste. But then again, as I get older, I think, my tastes have changed. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're creating a problem. I mean, if some of these immigrants commit crimes, or if they murder or rape, or something like that, are the RNLI going to take responsibility? Because I think they should. It's a Freemason organisation, the RNLI. I mean, most of what they do these days seems to be, I mean, how many damsels in distress do they rescue every year? Yes, I know sometimes they rescue a yachter, somebody in a yacht and falls overboard in the Irish Sea or something, and that's all very nice. But should they really be collecting men from Calais and bringing them to Britain? I mean, if you were to do that in the back of your car, if you were to sort of go to Calais and stuff 10 immigrants in your boot or something, you'd be arrested. So why do the RNLI have the ability to do that? They're actually committing a crime. Nobody should be allowed to enter the UK unless they have a passport and visa. And we should have much stricter rules. Anybody who's caught trying to enter the UK illegally should be arrested and then deported. Nobody should be given asylum who tries to enter the UK illegally. We need to have much stricter rules on who arrives here. For example, there's misuse of student visas, misuse of work permits, misuse of family visas. In other words, if once somebody gets here under some scheme or other, because they're all told by the lawyers, And the Home Office knows this. They're all told to say that they're refugees fleeing torture. Another scam is this gay stuff. You know, if you just come to Britain and if you're straight and you just say, oh, I'm gay and I had to flee because the secret police were tracking me and so on. I mean, this is just rubbish. It's unprovable anyway. But the government, the people who work for the Home Office are told to accept their application because it's the Kalergi plan. It always has been. The whole idea is to totally destroy. Now, anyone who's ever been homeless or everyone who's ever struggled to find a place to live knows that Britain is a very difficult country. We have very high population density, particularly in England, and we have very high demand, and rents and prices are very high. And yet people are moving from countries like Bulgaria, Romania, Albania and so on, which have plenty of land, plenty of property, nice climates, right? How can we have Albania is a NATO member. It's a EU applicant, right? And it's got a Mediterranean climate, and many people go there on holiday. There are resorts there. You could go there on holiday for a bucket and spade holiday. And yet these people are creating refugees. How is that allowed? I don't see why it's allowed. Well, I mean, how can a NATO member be creating refugees? I just don't get it. So I feel, but I mean, I know it's too late. But it's not just the government to blame. It's not just the RNLI and other phony charities. It's actually the public themselves, because the public are being trained into damaging their own interests. I mean, it's very weird how people who wouldn't have you as a guest, who wouldn't allow you in their own home, who would not offer you a cup of tea, are happy to have millions of complete strangers move in, many of whom have mental illness, many of whom have physical illness, many of whom have criminal records, just to come here as if they've got the right to do so. And yet if you went to, but British tourists who try to go to France are kept waiting in a long queue. And then then the Eurotards say things like, oh, that's because we left the EU, you see, and you see how terrible it is. But it's just EU policies just to try and punish us for having the temerity to try and want independence. I don't want to be a member of any international organisation. NATO offers no advantages to me, none whatsoever. They're certainly not defending my interests. Why isn't NATO defending British borders? We're being invaded. You know, it's so important to protect Ukraine's borders, but are the American borders safe? I mean, is the Mexican border safe? Of course not. No, but Ukraine's borders, oh, they're inviolable. You can't do that to them. No. The world is on the wrong track. And it's been on the wrong track for decades. And now the damage is so great that nothing can be done to save us. But none of this was necessary. But it's public stupidity who makes these things happen. I've always said it. To be a liar is bad, but to believe lies is just as bad or maybe even worse.